Hi, children. It's chapter 11, The Old Village. The next day was fine, just as Joe had said. It was so fine the children could hardly believe that there had been such a storm. But how hungry they were. "No breakfast today," Joe called out in a loud voice. "Think you can take it?" "Oh, sure, but I hope we get to have dinner." "Well, I think we can," said Joe. "We can surely find something to eat when we get to Old Village." "That's where we're going to find Bill." Alice and Henry started with a will to take down the tents. Violet and Benny began to roll up their blankets, but Joe did nothing. He sat down on a log and seemed to be thinking. This was not like Joe at all. "Let him alone," said Alice quietly to the children. "Just go on packing. He'll soon help too." But Joe didn't begin to pack. Instead, he called for them to stop packing and come to him for a minute. Now, what do you think that might be about? Think about that for a minute. Sounds to me like he's being very serious about something. I want you all to understand why I've brought you way up here. Maybe for nothing. Benny just said, "That's where we'll find Bill." Now, I don't really think we will find Bill, children. I never thought so. I think Bill probably died a long time ago. I think the boss at the lumber camp had never heard of him. Mr. Long and Mr. Hill hadn't either. And they've all lived around here for years. Joe stopped and smiled at Benny. Then he went on. "I don't really think we'll find the tin box either." "Why are you telling us this, Joe?" asked Alice. "Are you afraid we'll be disappointed?" "You're exactly right, little cousin. I don't want you to be disappointed because you can't solve the mystery. When we get to Old Village, I don't know what to do next. I thought maybe we might get a clue to the tin box, but we may not." "I don't care, Joe. I've had just enough fun camping, even if we don't find Bill." "Oh, yes, we've all had fun, Joe," Jessie broke in. Joe's face brightened. "Did you really?" he asked. "Even if we don't find a thing?" "I hope so. That's why I brought you so far. I thought we'd have fun anyway." "Don't you worry anymore, Joe," said Henry. "Camping is the thing we like to do the best in the world. It makes us think of our days in the boxcar and last summer when we were on Surprise Island. But you don't mind if we still look for clues, do you?" "Mind? No," said Joe. "I expect to look for clues myself. Just don't be disappointed, that's all." So I can sure understand that Joe would feel that way. Aren't they wonderful children to think about Joe's feelings as well? Then Joe hurried around and began to pack with a will, and this time the children were glad to see there was now a smile on his face. "We'll paddle faster today," Joe told them, "because we're so hungry. We can't see Old Village from here because the lake turns, but we ought to get there by noon." Do any of you remember what noon is? What time of day is noon? If you said 12 o'clock lunchtime, you are correct. Into the canoes went the things again, and into the canoes went 6 people. Off they went on the last part of their long journey. They paddled for a long time. All at once, Benny asked, "Joe, what would happen if I put a gray ghost fly on a line and threw it in the water behind the canoe?" "Well," answered Joe, smiling, "you might lose your rod. Then again, you might catch a fish." He was delighted to give Benny something to do. Then the little boy would not feel so hungry. "I'm going to try it." This time he put the fly on himself, and then he threw the line out behind the canoe. What are you trying to do? Break your rod? Shouted Henry from the other canoe. No, I'm fishing. On they went. Benny watched his line for a while. Suddenly Henry shouted, There goes your rod, Benny. Benny jumped up and caught it just as it was about to slide out of the canoe. Boy, you got a big one, cried Joe, stopping to look backwards. Pull him in slowly, Ben. Don't lose him. Don't get excited, whatever you do. Violet smiled. Joe was just as excited as Benny. How the big fish did fight to get away. But Benny played him carefully and slowly brought him to the side of the canoe. Want me to help you with that, young fellow? Asked Joe. Please. Benny was afraid he would lose that big fish. Joe leaned over, pulled it out of the water into the canoe. A lake trout, he called. What a beauty. It's going to feed all of us. Too bad that we didn't catch it yesterday, Benny. Isn't that always the way? We starved yesterday, and now just because we're getting near a store, we catch a fish. Never mind, said Joe. We will still eat 'em and enjoy 'em. He took up his paddle again. It was almost noon when they went around the last look in the lake. Then they could see a road that came right down to the beach from the old village. Well, Alice said, laughing, here we are at the end of Bear Trail. And we haven't found a clue, and we haven't found Bill. Joe, aren't you excited now? Excited? Yes, I am. I'm hungry too. Look at the beach. See that man waving to meet us? Someone always meets you with the canoe. Joe and Henry paddled faster without knowing it. Soon the canoes slid up on the beach, and the man helped pull up the canoes. Hello, strangers, he said. Taking the Bear Trail trip? Yes, said Joe. Right now we're looking for some place to eat. These children are almost starved. Is there any place to eat in the old village? Yes, sir. I run it myself. I call it Jim's Place. I'm Jim Carr. I'll cook you anything you want. Bacon, ham, deer, hamburger. Oh, hamburger! I want a hamburger! So do I, said Jessie. Jim laughed. Leave your things. Nobody will take them. My place is right up the road. The children saw it at once. There was a board over the door in black letters saying, Jim's Place. They all walked down the road toward it. I suppose most of the campers eat with you, right? Asked Joe. Right, said Jim. They stay overnight sometimes. Then they go back to Mr. Long's store by the road. We may do that, said Joe. Jim's Place was the biggest house in the old village. As they went in, they looked around. Everything was very clean. There were 3 tables and a delicious smell of onions cooking was in the air. I won't be long, said Jim. Sit down, make yourselves at home. Hamburger, onion, and potatoes for everybody. They sat down and looked at each other. They could hardly wait. Soon Jim came in with big white plates filled with hot food. Eat all you want, he said. More in the kitchen. Also, I just made 2 big apple pies. Maybe I can find some cheese to go with the pie. Everyone began to eat. Never did food seem so good to the hungry children. You see, we didn't have breakfast. Jim laughed. That's really true, said Joe. We got caught in the rain and lost most of our food. Too bad, said Jim. He went into the kitchen to get a pie. Soon a whole pie had disappeared into their tummies, and also some fine yellow cheese he served. Oh, I do feel better, said Violet. I'm ready for anything. Glad to hear that, said Henry, looking at her. You do look a little better, too. Then Alice said to Joe, you ought to stay we ought to stay in Old Village for one night. I think Violet ought to sleep in a bed in a house. Well, you can do that all right, answered Jim Carr with a laugh. You see that little old house across the street? I don't really own it, but I take care of it. It's been empty for many years. When campers want to stay overnight, I let them use it. I bought a lot of folding cots. The campers don't seem to mind sleeping 3 in a room. Jessie stopped to count. We wouldn't either, she said. So if they're sleeping 3 in a room, who do you think is sleeping where? Right, said Alice with a smile at Jessie. You, Violet, and I in one room. Joe, Henry, and Benny in another. There are 2 rooms, said Jim. 3 with a kitchen. Henry said, My, everything's working out so well, isn't it, Joe? Is there anything interesting to see in the old village, Jim? Oh, yes, said Jim. Some people go hunting for deer and moose. Then there's the old hermit over in the woods. Oh, do you know what a hermit is? A hermit is someone who lives all by themselves. There's an old hermit in the woods, lives all alone. People like to catch sight of him. He looks so queer with his long white beard. Then there are the native people up the road. They make baskets to sell. People always go and watch them make baskets when they stop over. Oh, let's go see the natives make baskets, said Jessie. Do they mind? Are they old? No, they don't mind. They like it. Yes, one of them's old. He's lived here all his life. He loves to talk. Oh, said Benny, looking at Henry. That's what I say too, said Henry softly to Benny. You mean the old native might give us a clue, though? Maybe, said Benny, smiling. Henry paid for their dinner, and they all went off up the road. Joe, began Jessie. Maybe this old Indian has heard of Bill a long time ago. We can ask him. Soon they could see a native girl sitting on the steps of an old house making a basket. My, doesn't she work fast, said Alice. Look at her fingers fly. Wish I could learn to do that, said Violet. You can. I will teach you, said the native girl who had heard every word she said. It's not hard at all. See, I just started this basket. I go in and out and over and under with this sweet grass. The girl worked slowly so that Violet could see what she did. Soon she held out the basket. Now you try it. Violet took the basket, and soon her clever little fingers were going in and out, over and under, just as the native girl had done. Wonderful, Violet, said Alice. You can do anything with your fingers. Yes, she can, said Henry, smiling. Then he thought surely Benny would say something about his sister Violet, as he always did. He looked around, but Benny was nowhere to be seen. Uh-oh, where is Benny? Benny, Benny, Joe called loud as he could. There was no answer. Benny had disappeared. That is the end of chapter 11. And I wonder, where do you think Benny has gone? See you soon.